Hi everybody, I'm looking forward to seeing you in class for our first data breach and data security class. Before class, you'll watch this video and get yourself oriented to what we're going to cover. We're going to be super interactive during our class time together, so these videos are an opportunity for you to sit and listen and absorb what we're going to be covering substantively in our reading for this week. So first, we're going to be looking this term at data security laws. There are not a lot compared to the number of data breach laws that exist out there, less than half of the states in the US. Lots of laws outside of the US as well, but again, far fewer laws explain how you are supposed to protect information, a lot more laws about a company getting in trouble if they fail to protect information. The laws that exist, some of them are general and just say you should protect information, but don't really give you much direction about how you as a company would go about protecting information. Some do have specifics, like you should encrypt information that is sensitive, or information that's in motion, or information that's accessible through the internet. But again, not a lot of the states have specifics. We're going to look at this in depth in our second class. You can also look in chapter 5.4 in the 2020 edition. In these videos, I will give you the 2020 edition because that's what's on Westlaw, but in your syllabus, there are references to the earlier editions of the book to the extent that those are the ones that you are working from. Data breach laws. This is where we're going to spend a lot of our time together. We're going to look at 4 different parts of breach laws. The first 3 are really we'll look at in sequence, and then the last one I want you to be thinking about throughout the entire course. So the first thing we're going to think about is whether or not the information, if breached, would trigger a duty to notify under a data breach notification law. So some of these are sensitive information. Sometimes the laws will talk about personal information, but beware because they have typically pretty narrow definitions of what personal information is. Although I say that, the definition is expanding. And in your data breach books, if you look at the table of contents, you will see that the table of contents kind of walks you through this process. So one of the first things you do is think about whether or not the information was triggering, and that is, got it right here, the trustee textbook. Again, also on Westlaw, but that's one of the first things we do is we look at whether the information was triggering, and that's in chapters 210 through 220. Then we think about whether or not the fact pattern was a breach. And so this is chapters 223 to 233. And there we're looking at whether we have unauthorized access, unauthorized acquisition, unauthorized use. The different laws define it slightly differently, but we're really looking at did a bad guy get at the information? Then the next thing that we look at, again, looking at the trustee table of contents, is whether or not an exception applies. Was the information encrypted? Perhaps it was computerized, or was in paper. It was not computerized, and the law applies only to computerized information in many situations. We will look at these as we go through our class. We're going to spend a lot of time on these elements because these become the most important to our analysis, but we're also going to look at things like how to notify and different parts of the breach process, breach notification process. But before we go there, and I'll give you a little overview of that, but before we go there, I want you to be careful about the analysis in the EU under GDPR. There, we're thinking about whether or not there's a material risk of harm to the individual. So it's a little bit of a different analysis, but as we'll see together in class as we work through some fact patterns, those often you'll end up with the same decision. We should notify, we shouldn't notify, even though the way you get there is a little bit different. And just a note about the fact patterns we're using in class. They are all fact patterns that I have taken from real life. So to the extent that you want to hear war stories about what some real cases are like, all of the fact patterns we are going to be using in class are taken from real fact patterns. So that is it, and I am looking forward to seeing everyone in class. I hope this was helpful.